The unexpected encounter. The deep void of space stretched infinitely, a dark and silent canvas that seemed to swallow every star in its cold embrace. The Icarus, a human warship built for combat and exploration, was stationed at the edge of an asteroid field that buzzed with activity, both natural and artificial. The surrounding asteroids, rich in minerals, were a valuable resource for the human colonies in the sector. As part of their patrol, the crew of the Icarus had been tasked with safeguarding the area from pirate raids, hostile alien factions, and any threats that might emerge. Commander Elena Drake stood in the command center of the Icarus, her sharp eyes scanning the numerous displays that filled the room. The bridge was calm, perhaps too calm. The hum of the engines, the occasional beep from various systems, and the steady rhythm of the crew's work had created a predictable atmosphere. She had been in command long enough to recognize when something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The data scrolling across the tactical grid was normal, as it always had been, until now. "Commander, we're receiving something on the gravimetric sensors," Lieutenant Mark Fisher reported, his voice laced with uncertainty. "It's faint, but it's there. A contact on the edge of the field." Elena immediately shifted her attention to the massive holographic display in front of her. A small, blipping red dot appeared at the edge of the sensor range. At first glance, it seemed like nothing more than a stray asteroid, or perhaps a small piece of debris drifting through the sector. But the longer she stared at the trajectory and speed, the more something didn't sit right with her. "Can we get a reading on its speed and trajectory?" Elena asked, her voice steady but commanding. Fisher's hands danced across the console as the data began to compile. "It's moving at a velocity much faster than expected for anything in this sector. Commander, this isn't natural." As the blip moved closer on the sensor grid, more readings began to pour in. It wasn't just the speed, it was the size, the mass, and the acceleration. These were all factors that didn't match any known debris or ships in the area. Something was wrong. Elena's mind raced. Could it be a rogue ship? Could pirates have slipped by their patrols undetected? Or was it something far worse? Something that didn't belong at all. She knew one thing for sure. The Icarus, one of humanity's finest warships, wasn't equipped to deal with an unknown threat of this magnitude without proper intelligence. "Sir, I'm tracking its acceleration. It's too fast for a conventional freighter," Fisher continued. "It should be slowing down by now. The mass is wrong too. This is not a typical ship." The tension in the room heightened, and Elena felt her pulse quicken as her thoughts shifted into high gear. She knew the situation was critical. She had seen many strange and hostile entities in her time in command, but nothing like this. Not in a sector that was supposed to be relatively safe. This was no ordinary encounter, and she had no intention of underestimating whatever was out there. "Send out a challenge to the ship," Elena ordered firmly. "If it's a pirate or an illegal miner, they'll respond. If it's something else, we'll need to be prepared." The communications officer, Lieutenant Carla Davis, quickly adjusted her console. A moment of silence passed before she spoke again, her voice tense. "Sir, I sent the challenge, but I'm getting something strange in return." The entire command center went silent as the unmistakable sound of human music blasted from the speakers. It was jarring, out of place in the vast, empty blackness of space. The song, "War Pigs" by Black Sabbath, boomed over the ship's communication systems. Carla, slightly confused, turned toward Elena. "They've broadcasted 'War Pigs' across all frequencies, Commander. It's coming through loud and clear. And I mean really loud. It's got this weird distortion, like it's shaking the ship itself." Elena's face hardened. She knew that human tactics in space were often unconventional, but this was something else. The song played through the speakers again, its eerie, distorted notes reverberating throughout the Icarus's hull. The eerie, haunting pulse of the music seemed to settle into the very walls of the ship, rattling the nerves of the crew. It was unsettling, disorienting. "That's no coincidence," Elena muttered, her lips pressed into a tight line. They're sending a message, trying to throw us off balance. And it's working. Commander, the air raid sirens are going off across all decks, Davis added. They've hacked into our emergency systems somehow. It's everywhere. It's almost like they're mocking us. Elena exhaled slowly. The human use of psychological warfare was well known. But this felt like a direct challenge. The humans were not just sending a message. They were declaring war, without saying a single word. The captain of the Icarus, proud of his reputation and that of the fleet, felt a chill run down his spine as the song continued to pulse through the ship, vibrating every system to its core. The humans had already launched their opening salvo, and it wasn't with guns or missiles. It was with sound, with chaos, and with fear. Keep the comms open, Elena ordered, her voice ice-cold. We need to hear everything they send. Yes, Commander, Carla responded, although she sounded far less certain now. Targeting systems, Elena called, her gaze unwavering as the alien freighter began to draw closer. Activate our particle lances and prepare the torpedo swarms. Get our macropods ready for resonant detonations. If they want to dance, let's show them what we can do. With swift efficiency, the crew began to follow her commands, the preparation of the ship's weapons echoing through the Icarus. The crew was tense, but they were trained. They had drilled for this. They had to. It was their duty, their job, to protect humanity from whatever threat lay ahead. As the tension in the command center rose, Elena adjusted the straps of her command chair, securing herself in preparation for a potential high-G maneuver. She had led her crew through countless missions, but this felt different. It felt dangerous. Any visual contact yet? Do we have a lock on their ship? Elena asked, her eyes never leaving the holographic screen. She knew the confrontation was inevitable, but she wanted to know exactly what they were facing. Not yet, Commander, Fisher replied, his fingers flying over the console. We've scanned for stealth limpet drones, but nothing unusual yet. We're still trying to get a visual. The crew fell into an uneasy silence as the ship's sensors continued to search for the human vessel. Elena felt a slight weight in her chest. The anticipation was almost too much. The humans were notorious for having unconventional warships, ships that appeared to be one thing and were, in fact, something entirely different. Then, a moment later, the visual feed flickered to life. The human vessel appeared on the holoscreen, but it wasn't anything like what the Icarus had been expecting. It looked normal, almost disappointingly so. Is this some kind of joke? Elena whispered under her breath as she stared at the image of the human freighter on the screen. It was devoid of cargo containers, a typical freighter design stripped of its usual features. The massive hull was smooth and unblemished, with sleek curves that made it look more like a ship of the future than one of the past. It's empty, Fisher said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Just hull framing spars holding it together. It's too quiet for a ship of this size to just be a freighter, Elena muttered. Scan for any weapons. I want every detail. If this is a Q ship, we need to know what we're up against. Fisher hesitated for a moment before speaking again. Commander, we've found weapons systems. Light point defense turrets mounted all over, but these are far more advanced than anything we've seen before. I'm getting strange readings, though. Almost like some of these systems aren't built for just defense, but offensive tactics as well. Elena's mind raced. This was no ordinary freighter. She was dealing with something far more cunning, something that had been designed to hide its true nature until it was too late. Prepare for engagement, she ordered, her tone cutting through the tension like a blade. But don't underestimate them. We've just stepped into their game. The battle begins. The tension on the Icarus reached a boiling point as Commander Elena Drake watched the human ship close in. Its empty, sleek hull reflecting the harsh light of distant stars. The eerie reverberation of war pigs still vibrated through the entire ship, like some kind of dark force trying to invade their minds. It was almost as if the humans were playing with them, using music to break their focus and unsettle them. The crew of the Icarus was accustomed to tactical warfare, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for this kind of psychological assault. "All systems are locked and ready, Commander," Lieutenant Mark Fisher confirmed, his voice tight with suppressed urgency. "Engage at will," Alina commanded, her voice steady despite the swirling storm of anxiety within her. The ship's weapons were prepared to fire. Advanced particle lances, designed for cutting through thick shields, and torpedo swarms capable of decimating any vessel in their path. The ship's systems hummed as they powered up, but the strange ship's behavior was impossible to ignore. There was something about it that gnawed at the back of her mind. Without hesitation, the first barrage of fire was launched. The Icarus's particle lances glowed bright against the backdrop of space, slicing through the blackness toward the human vessel. The shots were calculated and deadly, precise to the millimeter. Yet, despite their flawless trajectory, the human ship danced in ways that defied explanation. "It's not possible," Fisher yelled, staring at his console in disbelief. "We've already overclocked the targeting systems. There's no way they should be able to dodge these shots." But dodge it they did. The human ship, which appeared to be little more than a freighter moments ago, now twisted and maneuvered with unnatural agility. It was almost as if the ship was bending the laws of physics itself, its movements fluid and deliberate. The Icarus's attacks missed, every single one of them, slipping past the human ship with a mocking grace. Each failed shot sent a surge of frustration through Alina, but she remained calm, her mind calculating their next move. "Recalibrate the targeting systems," Alina barked. "We need to adjust for the evasive maneuvers. They're anticipating our moves. Whatever they're doing, it's not just skill. It's like they know us. They've studied our tactics." The Icarus's crew scrambled into action, recalibrating the weapon systems and adjusting the targeting protocols. The ship's artificial intelligence was working in overdrive, trying to compensate for the inexplicable movements of the human vessel. But with each new attempt to lock onto the target, the enemy ship slipped out of their grasp. At that moment, another blast rang out, louder and more forceful than before. The Icarus shuddered violently as the ship's hull was rocked by a direct hit. The shockwave sent crew members stumbling, and sparks flew from the control panels. Red lights flashed as alarms blared throughout the ship, warning of damage to the forward shields. "We've taken a hit," shouted the damage control officer, Lieutenant Carlos Alvarez. "Shields are down to 30%. Forward section is compromised." The impact reverberated throughout the command center, and Alina's mind raced. She had anticipated that a fight with the humans would be difficult, but this was something else. The Icarus was built to withstand all but the most extreme encounters, yet they were struggling against this mysterious human ship. "Status report," Alina snapped, turning her gaze back to the screen. "How bad is it?" "Starboard thrusters offline," Alvarez reported grimly. "We've lost maneuvering control on that side. We're drifting." Alina cursed under her breath, quickly assessing their situation. They were now drifting in space, an easy target for the human ship that was continuing to evade their attacks with unrelenting precision. It was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. The human ship wasn't just a force to be reckoned with. It was a mystery that defied all logic. "Target their engines. If we can disable their propulsion, they'll be forced to stop dodging," Alina ordered, her voice firm despite the chaos around her. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but she refused to let the crew see her fear. Fisher worked frantically at his station, recalculating the trajectory for another volley of shots. "I've got the angle, Commander. Weapons are primed." The next barrage of particle beams shot forward, faster than the previous attempts, this time aimed directly at the human ship's engine section. Alina held her breath as she watched the beams streak toward their target, only for them to miss once again. The human vessel was already adjusting its position before the shots even reached it. "How are they doing this?" Fisher muttered under his breath, frustration evident in his voice. Another blast rocked the Icarus, this time from the human ship's own weapons. The shockwave reverberated through the entire ship, knocking several crew members off their feet. The Icarus's shields were weakening rapidly, and they couldn't seem to land a single blow on the human vessel. It was as if the ship had an unnatural awareness of their every move, a foresight that was impossible to explain. "Get those shields back up," Elena ordered. "Prepare the torpedo swarm. If they want to play this game, we'll give them a fight they'll never forget." The crew scrambled to respond, their movements quick and practiced despite the rising tension. The torpedo pods were loaded, the resonance-shatter detonations primed and ready. Elena knew that this was their last chance. If the next round of attacks failed, they would be vulnerable, sitting ducks in the void of space. "Prepare for another attack," Elena said, her voice cold as she stared at the rapidly approaching human ship. "This time, we're not missing." As the Icarus drew closer, Elena could sense the shift in the air. The human ship had stopped dodging. Instead, it hovered at a distance, as if daring the Icarus to fire again. "Fire," Elena commanded, her heart pounding in her chest. The torpedoes launched from the Icarus, lighting up the dark expanse as they sped toward the human ship. It was a volley of unimaginable power, and this time, there would be no escaping it. The detonations would tear through the human ship's hull with pinpoint precision. But again, the ship did something unexpected. In a burst of speed that defied all logic, the human vessel darted to the side, narrowly avoiding the deadly swarm of torpedoes. It was like the ship could see the future, reacting before the Icarus even had a chance to strike. "This isn't possible," Fisher whispered in disbelief. "How are they dodging everything?" The human ship turned and faced the Icarus head-on, its engines blazing with light as it charged forward, closing the distance between them in seconds. The Icarus had prepared for a long-range battle, not a close-quarters one. It was too late to avoid a direct collision. The Icarus was no longer in control. The human ship had outmaneuvered them at every turn, and now it was their move. The battle had shifted from space combat to something far more dangerous, a test of will and cunning. "Brace for impact," Elena shouted, her eyes locked on the human vessel as it barreled toward them. In the back of her mind, a small voice whispered, "What are they planning?" She had been in countless battles before, but this was different. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for their very understanding of war itself. The humans had shown that they could think outside the box, could outmaneuver even the most advanced technology the Icarus had to offer. The captain of the Icarus could only wonder, how far would they go to win this battle? Unforeseen strength. The battle raged on as Elena Drake gripped the armrests of her command chair, eyes fixed on the screen showing the relentless human ship that seemed to anticipate every move the Icarus made. The ship's eerie, distorted music continued to pulse throughout the Icarus, a constant reminder of the unnerving psychological warfare that the humans were employing. It was more than just a fight for survival. It was becoming a battle for understanding, and every passing second only deepened the mystery. The human ship, which had seemed like a simple freighter at first, had proven to be anything but. With each attempt to fire, to engage, the human vessel dodged with unnatural agility. It wasn't just about the ship's superior maneuvering. It was as if it was being controlled by some unseen force, anticipating their every move, turning their strategies into wasted energy. The humans weren't just dodging. They were toying with them. Elena knew that they couldn't keep missing. The Icarus was a formidable vessel, a warship capable of turning entire fleets to dust. But against this ship, it felt like the odds were insurmountable. The human ship's unpredictable, erratic movements were not only disrupting their weapon systems, they were throwing them into a panic. Every failed shot felt like a nail in the coffin. If they couldn't land a hit soon, they would lose the upper hand, and with their shields failing, they wouldn't be able to withstand many more hits. "Status report," Elena barked, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "How much longer until we're back at full combat readiness?" Lieutenant Carlos Alvarez, the ship's engineering officer, turned to her with grim determination in his eyes. "We're doing everything we can, Commander. The starboard thrusters are back online, but the shields are still below optimal. We'll need at least 10 minutes to restore full power." 10 minutes, Elena repeated, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. 10 minutes was an eternity in space combat, especially when the enemy was one step ahead at every turn. "We don't have 10 minutes, Alvarez. The human ship isn't going to wait around for us to recharge." As if on cue, another barrage of fire from the human ship slammed into the Icarus's hull, sending vibrations through the ship's corridors. Elena could feel the force of the explosion reverberate in her chest. The impact knocked the lights out for a brief moment, throwing the bridge into a brief but chaotic darkness. When the lights flickered back on, the damage was evident. Cracks had appeared on the outer hull, and the once sturdy shields were down to only a fraction of their capacity. "We're barely holding together," Fisher said, his face pale. "They're wearing us down." Elena nodded, her eyes narrowed in thought. They couldn't keep this up forever. At this rate, the human ship would continue to land blow after blow, until there was nothing left of the Icarus to defend. She needed to act fast. She needed to understand their enemy better, and she needed to outsmart them. Suddenly, something clicked in her mind. It wasn't just their weaponry that was dangerous. It was the human ship's unpredictability. They weren't relying solely on advanced technology or superior tactics. They were relying on something else entirely, something that Elena had failed to recognize at first. The human ship wasn't merely a battle vessel. It was a decoy, a riddle designed to confuse and disorient. Its lack of cargo, its empty core, these were not weaknesses. They were the ship's greatest strength. By making it appear like a simple freighter, the human ship had led the Icarus into a false sense of security, drawing them into an unexpected, head-on confrontation. Elena's fingers hovered over the comms console, then pressed the button to open a secure line to her crew. "We're going to change the game," she said, her voice firm. "We've been fighting this war on their terms, reacting to their moves. It's time we took the initiative." "Commander?" Fisher asked, confused by her sudden shift in strategy. "We stopped playing their game. They're using psychology against us, expecting us to be predictable." Elena replied, her eyes focused on the human ship as it shifted once more in space. "We're going to break the cycle. Fisher, get me a new firing solution, one that accounts for erratic movements. We'll fire in unpredictable bursts. Give them no chance to predict our next move." "We're going off pattern?" Fisher asked, uncertainty in his voice. "Exactly. The human ship is anticipating our next step. They're reading us like a book. It's time to rewrite the narrative." Fisher hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Understood, Commander. Adjusting weapons systems now." Elena's mind raced as she worked through the calculations. This wasn't just a physical battle. It was a battle of wits. And to win this, they had to stop being the predictable target. She had learned from the past few exchanges that the humans weren't just relying on technology. They were reading the Icarus's movements. They knew what the crew would do before they even did it. As the Icarus shifted course once more, Elena's eyes locked on the human ship, which was now speeding toward them, closing the distance rapidly. The music blasted again from the human vessel's communications, its distorted notes almost drowned out by the tense silence that fell over the Icarus's crew. It wasn't just a psychological tool anymore. It was a warning. Elena's voice was calm, but the weight of her words was unmistakable. "This is it. Fisher, fire on my mark." "Ready, Commander," Fisher said, adjusting the targeting system. Elena watched the distance between the two ships close. The human ship wasn't slowing down. It was coming straight at them, as if daring the Icarus to make a move. The tension in the room thickened, each crew member waiting for the command to fire. Elena felt the familiar tightness in her chest. This was the moment. The humans wanted a fight. then they would get one. Now, Elena shouted. The Icarus's cannons fired with a ferocity that shook the entire ship. But this time, the shots weren't aimed in a straight line. They were random, unpredictable, like a barrage of artillery fire scattered across the battlefield. There was no pattern to follow, no way for the human ship to predict the trajectory of the beams. It was pure chaos. For a brief moment, Elena felt a surge of hope. The human ship hesitated, almost as if unsure how to respond to the erratic barrage. Then, with alarming speed, the human ship swerved, narrowly dodging the first series of beams. But Elena was ready. The second round came just as quickly. And this time, one of the beams connected with the human vessel's engine section. There was an explosion, a flash of light that lit up the dark vacuum of space. Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Did they hit it? Was the ship damaged? The status board flickered to life, displaying a message. Direct hit. Damage to propulsion system. Did we get it? Fisher asked, his voice filled with disbelief. We did, Elena replied, her eyes still fixed on the screen. We've taken out their engines. They can't keep dodging now. The human ship, for the first time since the engagement began, slowed down, its evasive maneuvers stuttering as its propulsion systems failed. It was a victory, one that had been hard-earned. But Elena knew better than to assume that the battle was over. The human ship was still a formidable opponent, and there was no telling what other tricks it had up its sleeve. As the Icarus closed in, Elena's mind remained sharp, focused. She knew that this fight had only just begun. They had gained the upper hand. But the true test would come when they boarded the human ship. What would they find inside? And more importantly, what would the humans do next? The Icarus was no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for answers.